we're going to see how much we can do this. I'm currently on campus, but it's cool enough that there's not a lot of people outside, so I don't think I'll be bothering a lot of people if I get some videoing done. Okay, so I apologize for this one being late, but it's been, again, something of a time, but not to do Harry Potter, because believe me, these books give me plenty of things to talk about. So this video is about 2 chapters, and that would be, God, if I can remember these correctly, The Whomping Willow and Gilderoy Lockhart. And these are sort of a really interesting pair of chapters to have together, because what they actually do is give you Harry's and Ron's adventure in the Flying Ford, and then a whole bunch of just people reacting to this adventure. And I mean like a whole bunch. So I apologize, but I'm going to read them, because I'm not going to be able to remember them off the top of my head. Of course we get Harry's and Ron's. Obviously, they were there for most of this. We get Snape's, we get McGonagall's, we get Dumbledore's, we get Hermione's, the Gryffindor houses, Percy's, then we get, in the next chapter, Molly Weasley's, and then we've got Malfoy, Gilderoy, Sprout, and Collin all sort of mangled together on that one. So we got a lot of reactions to this adventure, which is a bit odd because we've never actually had the sheer number of reactions up to this point in time. A lot of the other adventures show we get 1 or 2, maybe 3, 4 at the outmost, but this is a lot of people, and we're getting all of these different responses from them. So the question is, then, why are we getting these responses now? Why is it that this adventure has prompted such an exploration of not only consequences but sheer responses in regards to the flying car? And I think sort of the easy answer to that is because it's important for us to get these now. Something has changed within this story that means we need to go ahead and consider the responses as well as the actions. So I've said it's important, but the question then becomes, why is it important? And I think the big thing to gain from this is how fame, media, and attention, see what I did there? Then starts to actually come into the story, and how it plays with, changes, interacts with what's going on, and how it actually mediates everything that's going on, and then in that way imposes that mediation on the actions. It becomes this cycle of attention and action and action and attention that I think is going to be really important, not only for this book, but for the series overall, but is becoming more important in this book than it was in the previous one, which is why we're sort of getting this shift now. What you have to keep in mind, of course, is that the more something, whether that's a person, an opinion, an action, is visible to society or to the majority, the more it is then going to have to be responded to. You can't see a really apparent thing and not respond to it, because not responding is actually a response, and that's something we have to keep in mind. If you see bullying going on, if you don't step in, it's not that you're not responding. Not stepping in is your response. You've seen it, you've acknowledged it, and you've decided not to do anything. And that's really important. So we sort of have to look at then how this response helps to mediate things and change things within the society. Because what happens is you have to be careful not to set a precedent. With Harry and Ron's Ford, I really want to say escapades, but that's not the car. But with their escapades in the Ford, you can't not respond to it. This actually requires a response, because if you don't respond to it, that's setting a precedent. That's saying that if you do something like this, you'll be okay in the long run, because these previous people didn't get affected by it. So we need to have a response, and we need to have a response from like as many people as possible. What we also get here, though, is again that counterculture movement, because we have the society's response through all of the grown-ups, the people in authority, Snape and McGonagall and Dumbledore, and Molly Weasley, and the Ministry. We get all those responses. Oh, I should have thrown the Ministry on that list. And then we get the counterculture response, which is the Gryffindor house, who literally applauds them and is like, yay, that was fantastic! But what's super interesting about this is why we get that counterculture response. And it's not because they think it's cool. Well, it's partially because they think it's cool. The other part, and the really important part that we're going to see, is the Gryffindor house has this response because they don't get the consequences. Harry literally shields them from those consequences. McGonagall is going to take away points from Gryffindor, and Harry reminds her that since this didn't happen during term, why should the rest of Gryffindor be punished for it? And she agrees with this. She's just like, yeah, that makes sense. And she sort of has this, like, if not a smile, she frowns less. So the Gryffindors respond to Harry and Ron's adventures in a positive manner. Not because it was the right thing to do, but because it was a cool thing to do. It broke rules, and to them it almost looks like there were no consequences. There is something of a precedent being set in this moment. It's just that they're not seeing the consequences as apparently because they're not feeling it. If points were removed, like we're going to see later, Gryffindor House would turn on the two of them because they're suddenly aware of the consequences, and they themselves are feeling those consequences. Percy's already a good example of this, even if we don't go further, even within this example. Percy wants to work at the Ministry. His father is facing an inquiry at the Ministry. This could, in the long run, affect his job at the Ministry, because it's going to be on his father's record. So Percy, of course, he's seeing the consequences, and he's just like, meh. But we write him off. And it seems to be, again, because those consequences aren't something that necessarily goes on to us. Percy isn't a character that we necessarily like. Hermione is still sort of leaning this way, but we like her, and she's not leaning so into the extreme as we think Percy probably does. Which is interesting. The same thing can be said for the Howler, which I have to say I don't like the Howler. I don't think humiliating a person is the best way to convince them not to do something. I think it's a really good way to convince them not to go to you if they have to do something. Like, my parents always said, like, if you go to a party and get drunk, call us. We're not going to be mad at you. We're not going to humiliate you. We will come pick you up. Just don't drive drunk. Don't get in a car with someone who's drunk. And don't stay in a situation where you're going to feel uncomfortable. Call us. We will pick you up. It will be okay. Because they want me to be able to go to them if something like this happens. To humiliate Ron here isn't discouraging him from doing things wrong. It is encouraging him to not get caught doing these things. And Ron himself admits this because he says that Fred and George themselves flew the car multiple times. They never got caught. So that becomes sort of the interesting thing. And I mean, the rest of the house, not even just the house, the rest of the school responds to it like it's a funny thing. That's because it doesn't affect them. It affects Ron, definitely. It humiliates him entirely. It affects Harry. His name comes up, and he was involved in it. And in a lot of ways it also affects Neville, who has received one of these things before. He knows what it's like. He knows how hurtful it can be. So he not only empathizes, but he also likely, again, experiences the same emotions that he did when he received his own Howler. So we have this, if you don't feel the consequences, you're less likely to respond. Which is interesting, because what this then leads into is attention as a negative consequence. Because what happens is, at first we get this push and pull between getting punished and getting attention for it. They're punished, but then they go into the Gryffindor house and everyone's like, yay, and they actually go to bed happy. But then again, at the start of the next chapter, we have the Howler, and we have Gilderoy, Collin, and Draco moment. That's when Collin's asking for a photo, and Gilderoy steps in, claiming, of course, that he was making it better for Harry so that people don't think he's trying to stand out, and Draco responding to that. These are moments when that attention is actually becoming negative. This is becoming a consequence in and of itself. Sudden inexplainable costume change. Okay, it's perfectly explainable. My camera battery died and I haven't had a chance to film until now. But I'm back in front of the brick wall, so that's cool. Okay, so unfortunately my camera battery died sort of right when I was getting to the heart of what this chapter reminded me of. And that's how media outlets have this tendency to use this idea of attention as punishment within our daily lives. A lot of times what media and fame permit us to do is get in this mindset that just because someone's been in the spotlight before, that we have almost the right, we feel, to always have them in the spotlight, to know everything they're doing, and to make judgments on that knowledge. And I don't think that's really a healthy thing that we should be thinking about, but it's certainly what's being portrayed here. But again, I don't think it's being portrayed in a positive light. I think Rowling is well aware that media and attention in this sense creates a lot more problems than it does solutions. And we're certainly going to see this as we go through the rest of the series. So to have it begin now with some 12-year-olds, it sort of shows you just how parasitic it can be. Because this isn't full-grown adults. These people can't consent to being in the spotlight all of the time, like someone like Gilderoy Lockhart can. But they're being pushed to it, and they're being judged because of that. And that's not a good thing. So, okay. I apologize again that the video is quite late this time, but I'm still going. So I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. Have a good one.